Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Revisiting Era. Today's episode is going to be focusing on something a little bit more complex, but something that is super cool to talk about. With me today, I have a really great friend. Her name is Julissa, and we have finally made time to schedule a time to sit down and do the podcast, which I am so excited about. This episode entails a lot of things in the field of psychology, in the topic of trauma, which you guys know I love to talk about, I love informing people about, and I love advocating. But then again, I want to make a note that we are not experts on this topic, this field. We just wanted to share a similar experience we had that I think would be very beneficial for others to hear and for others to grow by, because we definitely received a lot of growth from being able to understand how the past connected with the present. And so I really wanted to dive deeper into this topic, which is intergenerational trauma, intergenerational curses, with the title being Breaking Generational Curses. So I want to introduce my guest with you guys today. Her name is Julissa. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Julissa. I'm glad to be here. So a little bit about me. I grew up dancing in the church.
I also grew up dancing in the church.
Fun fact. And also, I'm 24 years old, believe it or not. A lot of people don't believe my age, but I could just say it's because I have those genes that make you look younger than you
have that
actually
youthful
are.
glow.
Yeah. I attend college. I love working with kids. I try to volunteer as much as possible in events. It brings me a lot of joy. And yeah.
Okay, awesome. Let's begin with this topic. I loved your intro, by the way. Super sweet and simple.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So talking about like intergenerational trauma, I want to start off by like defining what it is. I feel like when we were coming up with the topic, we went through like a series of things we could talk about and kind of landed on this one, just given that we have a pretty similar background.
Yeah.
We both come from, we're basically like first generation, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot with being like the daughter of like an immigrant parent, the daughter of like parents who English was obviously not their first language, and just having to go through that struggle of like, what do we do and how do we want to shape our future and the future of our like future kids and etc.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it.
Intergenerational trauma, it refers to trauma that is passed from a trauma survivor to their descendants, but it can also be referred as transgenerational or multi-generational trauma. People who experience like the intergenerational aspect of it, it comes with a lot of symptoms, patterns in behavior, psychological effects from trauma or experiences that were not ours, but actually like those who came before us, like our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and it's passed down. That's a little bit different than the concept of generational curses, because essentially a lot of how our parents were raised, they kind of took with them. Given that mental health and like mental health help and has been a very taboo subject, especially for their generation, ours as well, but not so much. I feel like our generation is becoming way more open and informed on a lot of mental health struggles. And we've come a very, very long way, even in the past decade, than what it used to be in regards to mental health. Something that stands out to me immediately is how our parents viewed mental health. It's a pretty like direct, like boom, like we're just starting off with that. It's pretty intense, but I feel like we both have a lot to say on how our parents viewed mental health in general. Did they learn from us? Did they learn from their own struggles? Like, how did you see your parents or like your mom like deal with mental health, and how did she view it?
Wow, that's a hard-hitting question.
So take your time.
But it's also a good question. And I think we've spoke about that before recording this podcast. And I would say my mom, actually, I had like asked her about what she's been through, because she's been through a lot. And she's dealt with a lot of childhood trauma that she told me, like as an adult, that after dealing with a really hard situation, that she felt like a lot of symptoms that one would say is like symptoms of depression. But at that time, she didn't know she was going through depression because it wasn't spoken about. So now she tells me, yeah, like then I didn't know what it was, but I would say I was depressed then. And she found out about a lot of mental health issues like here in the States, and like having gone to like workshops and like spoken to social workers and stuff. And yeah.
No, for sure. I think it's such a shock to them when they realize like they come in the country and they're like, there's a whole other field of health that was not spoken of in their countries. I know like you're Bolivian.
Yeah.
I'm a Salvadorian, and like for sure they grew up in like the slums basically is where my mom like grew up when she was very young, and then she moved around a lot. But like overall, I think a lot in like countries in Central South America, they view mental health as like kind of like a fabrication of the mind, as something that can be cured more spiritually than physically. And to this day, I really don't think my mom has a firm understanding that mental health is very much physical, but I definitely know that she has grown, and through her own issues and through observing me and my like hospitalizations and like my struggles with depression, her eyes have definitely opened to see that the brain is very much connected to the body. Everything is intertwined. Do you have something to say about that?
No, I agree. Like, it's mind, soul, body. You have to take care of every single of those areas, because if you don't take care of one area, then it'll affect the other. And it'll be like a bad cycle. And yeah, like in Bolivia, a lot of people, are not educated, or at that time, at my parents' time, they weren't educated on it. And they probably thought it was because they were in a bad mood. They didn't think it was depression. So I think it's important that, as we grow older, and that they realize that that wasn't the case, that it oftentimes is related to other things that are psychologically, neurologically based.
Yes, absolutely. I want to bring in the topic of religion, but not in the way that me and Julissa kind of like have grown in it. Now I want to bring in the topic of like ritualistic religion. I know my mom was raised Catholic, and she later converted to Christianity, like way later when I was here. But a lot of her perception on mental health did come from the church. And usually she was always made and taught that like you feel this way and bad things happen to you because of your own actions, and because you're not praying enough, you're not doing enough, your good deeds are not enough, you're not obeying, you're not doing this and that. And a lot of that really stuck with her when she came to the States and when she was raising me, because for the longest time I am literally the first of both my parents, or like the first kid of theirs that was diagnosed at a very, very early age with mental health issues. I was diagnosed with OCD and severe depressive disorder when I was 11 years old. And getting those diagnoses, it was like they were in shock as much as I was in shock, because I was a little kid and I was like, there's no way I got this. Like, it's got to be something else, which in the end, it did turn out to be a misdiagnosis at the time. Now, I do have severe depressive disorder, but back then I didn't. But, that's a whole different story of my medical trauma, this and that. But I was the first in my immediate, probably in my whole family, to get a mental health diagnosis for depression. And when they saw that, like, girl, they weren't more so aiming towards that, oh my gosh, we have to like, we're gonna do everything possible to help you heal. No, they were full on enraged, angry, and it was like, girl, you are doing something wrong. You are not praying enough. You are not doing enough. This happened because of something you did. Like, God is punishing you. He's going to punish me over something you did. And yes, like, then again, that does alter like your spirituality and your walk in the faith, which I can definitely go into at a later time on my own spiritual journey and how I like left the church and came back. But I would say that was one of the main things that kind of drew me away from my faith initially. It was like my parents' perception on how they viewed something that I clearly was not in control, but they made it seem like I was in control based on how they were raised. Do you have anything similar about like how they viewed mental health?
Yeah, my mom has shared with me like similar stories of how like religion or people who practiced a certain religion judged her for it and blamed it on her. Firstly, I want to say I'm sorry you went through that. That
Girl,
sounds
it's okay.
really messed up. But also, it's just like ignorant people just like they seem to be lacking knowledge, and it's very evident. And unfortunately, they've affected other people's view on certain things. And with that, in the beginning, like I know that I've dealt with a lot of things that have affected me emotionally and physically and mentally, and my mom has seen those things, and although she didn't really understand them, like she tried to. And I know that sometimes like her own perceptions or perspectives or opinions got in the way of that for sure. Like it wasn't not everything that like our relationship wasn't always perfect, and her like only like I could say is that she tried her best to help me and be the best mom that she could be. Yeah, seeing me go through certain things, she's been able to understand more what that entails. And I'd say it's a really hard topic to like talk on because there's like so much.
It hits a lot of like parts that we don't want to really take out, but I think it's needed, you know?
It really is needed.
A lot of what I've noticed with like, I don't know, what generation are our parents? Like they're like post boomer, but even like the boomers, you know, they viewed mental health or like exhibiting symptoms of anxiety, depression, paranoia, like all these things like hyperactivity, they viewed it as like weakness, and they didn't see it as like how they would view a physical illness. Like, you know, you break your arm and it's evident and it's like, oh, I'm so sorry, like there's a process to recovery and like take it easy. Like they view mental health and depression as in like a curse. Like you're now like the biggest burden alive because like you're too sad to go get a job, you're too sad to get up and work and like do things for yourself. Like, why are you sleeping too much? Why are you too tired? Like just fix it because you're capable of fixing it. But what they don't see that it is very much physical, and it is very much a limitation and like a disability that stops you in your tracks. And I don't know, it's just that view of like their mentality and how they were brought up is to not present any signs of weakness or like a lack of strength. And I think that has a lot to do with how like they were raised on reputation and status.
And they're also on survival mode. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't like excuse them or say that, oh, the way they acted is okay. But it also is like, I don't know, I try to like look at it from their perspective, and like you said, they grew up in like environments where they were trained or like taught to be like strong. Yeah, I also think a lot of times like Hispanics could also be like high functioning. They could have mental illnesses, but they are just high functioning.
Yeah.
I don't know, that's just because they're like in another country where they have to like learn how to survive. And
yeah, it's not really an option for them to kind of like give up on the spot. Like you have a whole family to take care of, you have all these obligations from a very young age. And I think that's kind of what got in the way of like my mom like being able to see like her own needs.
Yeah, which is really sad.
Because like they were always putting her needs like behind or like others' needs in front of her own. And I think it wasn't until later in life when like things were absolutely falling apart that she was able to see like, I am like so sick from all the stress on my body and it's showing. And yeah, I don't know.
Real.
Have you seen like, what's been your experience with like stress and like physical symptoms as like, or your mom's like with that?
I've definitely, my mom has shared with me that she's just worked for so many years and she prioritized her children, me and my brother. And now she's like thinking about like about herself, and she wants to like heal. And she even suggested that we could go to therapy and like it would be good, and which is like a really big step. And I don't know, I respect her a lot for it. But yeah, chronic stress is no joke, and like my mom has seen how it can affect someone. And not to say that we can't also experience that, because I've definitely experienced moments of chronic stress because of a traumatic situation. Going back to your question, I would say that I definitely have dealt with chronic stress and the effects of it, and I've seen it in my mom's life. Now that we know more, since they didn't have a lot of those resources and like a lot of tools to educate them on those things, that we can like change that ourselves and like try to break those cycles of like bottling everything into, like bottling up everything, using healthy ways to like release those emotions so that it doesn't develop into chronic stress or illnesses, you know?
Yeah, let's talk about behavior, like behaviors we saw our parents exhibit in the way that they raised us when it came to mental health, when it came to addressing any sort of trauma or any sort of situation that was affecting them personally or within the family. I think a big behavior that I noticed, which is kind of like, let's sweep it under the rug mentality, is that whenever they were going through something, they would keep it to themselves. I feel like a lot of self isolation was a big component of what I observed on how my mom and my like dad dealt with things that they were going through. It wasn't like, let's talk about it. It wasn't like, let's share, like, let's work on ways to fix it. It was more like, I'm going to self isolate. I'm going to tell no one. I'm going to bottle it all up. And I don't know. I've just seen that a lot with immigrant households. I don't know if you've seen it too. With like, you have to hide your feelings, basically. You can't show, like, again, with the weakness thing.
Personally, my mom, she's a very emotional person. And I mean that well. It's not bad to be an emotional person. But, like, I feel like she can't really hide her feelings. Like, it just shows. Like, she literally can't hide it. And it's so funny. Because I can't hide it either. And yeah, so it was, like, different in my case. She would really, she wouldn't self-isolate. Well, I guess there would be moments where she did, but mostly she would talk about it with like other people, like, either in the church or like family members.
Yeah, that's good. She could confide.
Like trauma dumping.
Confide in someone. No, that's really good, because I feel like when you hold it in, like it's just gonna damage you in the long run. And like there were times like my mom would be crying for it, and I'd be like, why? And then she'd be like, oh, nothing. And so it was a lot of that, and then it would just explode like in the end, like it would just, everything would hit the fan. But yeah,
that's real too.
so that's the weird behavior. Any other like behaviors you noticed that you think were passed down to her?
I would say like now she's very vocal about her emotions, how she feels, but she would tell me like as a younger woman, she would be very nice, like very like hide how she's feeling just so she doesn't hurt other people's feelings. But like you said, like it got to the point where like it just exploded. So yeah, she's also realized that it didn't really work in her favor.
Okay, so moving on, we obviously know hurt people, hurt other people. So how did we see our parents like trauma translate or display itself while like they parented or like anything related to that?
My mom has definitely had a lot of childhood trauma, which sadly like it affected her self-esteem. She shared with me earlier. It affected a lot of things, like the way she viewed herself, her confidence. I really do believe in that saying that hurt people hurt other people, because I've seen it in my mom's life, and she has seen it in her mom, and how her mom behaves and treats others. I feel like childhood trauma or any kind of trauma really does, like if you don't address it, it affects the way you act and the way you like go about treating others. And it's something where in my mom's case, like she has been hurt by people that she that like one would think would love them and respect them. And so she would oftentimes feel like insecure when other people would treat her in similar ways. And it would like affect her. Like she'd be like, this person views me this way. And it must be true because I've been treated that way by people who love me. I don't know if I'm explaining myself.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But it's like, it really, she has shared with me that it affected a lot of things, like her self-esteem, how she views herself and her identity.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And it's something that is very hard to change, I think, especially like the older you get and the later you address your trauma, the harder it's going to be. But what I've seen in like my parents and then other people like your mom is their incredible like ability to recognize that even like at a later age you're able to recognize it and like be like, I'm inspired to heal myself because like it's something that I am worthy of having, you know.
Yeah.
I am worthy of taking this, which caused me a lot of pain, and in a way mending it because I deserve to have healing in my life despite what I went through. And for a lot of people, I think they never realize that. A lot of people kind of sulk in their sadness and be like, this is how it was, this is how I was raised, like I had to deal with it, so it's whatever. Like I'm not gonna do anything to change it. I'm not gonna do anything to change my kids' lives or like acknowledge that these things hurt me and that I ended up hurting my kids as a result of it. But I think it's like really cool because like as we grow, especially as we grow spiritually, as we grow up, like there's just this inclining desire, like I don't want to live like this forever, basically. And they were willing to change and take skills that they learned and other people taught them, and they weren't kind of like restricting themselves to it, which is really, really cool. So there's a lot when it comes to the curses part. I feel like I'm not only talking about like Hispanic, I'm talking about like a lot of like different cultures as well. But in my perception, like my father was absent, and so my mom basically raised me and my sister. And so a lot of that came with initially her perception when getting married to my dad was like, men are the head of the household. But given that he was absent, roles reversed, she had to be the head of the household. And it took her years. Like it took her till I was 18 years old to finally say I'm able to live by myself on my own and be like a solo parent.
Yeah.
And like little did she know she had been doing that for most of our lives. But when I was 18, she made the decision to like be like, I am finally gonna be independent, like I'm gonna do it. And it took her forever. She was finally able to do it, and she's been independent and making her own money and living on her, like she's thriving. And so it's just crazy to see, like there's one thing, the whole man has to be the head of the household thing. We're blurring that stereotype. Like you clearly, like it's not, especially if they're causing you and your family a lot of harm. I do think the decision that is best is to leave. I don't know. If I was in an abusive relationship, I would leave just to avoid my kids going through that. Do you have anything to say on that?
I really respect your mom for that. Like, because it's really powerful, like your mentality and you realizing, like, wow, like I can do this by myself. Like, I don't need to depend on someone that hasn't shown that he can like help the household. I don't need to depend on someone that's not really there for the family. And like she realizing that, I'm sure it was empowering for her, and it gave her the confidence to like do what she has already been doing, which is like being like the provider.
Yeah, the provider, yeah.
I really wished growing up that there would be like a male head of the household. Like I really wish that was like the case in my case, but obviously my mom has had partners that haven't displayed that, and it's something that really affects me. I don't know if I like navigate through those feelings. But I would say, unfortunately, there's a lot of men, and I think I've spoken to you about this, that some of them are passive. If the man of the house is acting in like a way that they weren't really designed to be, it like affects other things, and it like distorts like the family dynamic. But I respect those moms out there that really like put in their all to like, you know, support the family. It's something that like I really do believe it's God giving them the strength to do that, and their love for their children. Obviously it's not always perfect, but it's something to applaud at.
Yeah, and like that whole mentality it comes from past generations. Like I know like grandparents and like great grandparents, like the wife was submissive to the husband, and if you didn't have a man, you would find another one, whether good or bad, like and that would affect and traumatize like your kids. And that's just been something that's been passed down from generation. Like the man has to provide, you have to have someone there, and like it doesn't matter like what they do to you, if they hurt you, if they walk over you. And it's such a toxic mentality. And I think like once like we get here to this point, like in
Yeah.
our time, they're finally starting to realize, like here, especially in America, which is very individualistic. I think it kind of
Yeah.
promotes that, like, be free from your abuser, like,
Yeah.
and kind of regain your sense of self,
Yeah.
which is not what past generations had done. And so in their minds, like initially, like, yes, it was instilled in them for like the man to be submissive and for them to be
Yeah.
submissive and for them to kind of like give it their all and give up their own life and their identity for like the family household name, you know, which is super upsetting. But in the end, I think it was a journey, like especially with like our moms, it was a journey of self-discovery that they can do this, they can be independent and they can be strong, and that's the face they're putting on for their children. So in the end, like I really hope that is the case for most people going through a situation like that, because it really does affect the kids. Because like, what model are you giving them? Are we going to repeat another generation of like abusive, toxic men? I really would hope not, and that's the last thing I want to give my kids. So
No, it's definitely not. It's not an option. And my mom, she was like, she came to this country by herself, like not knowing anyone here. She just felt this need to escape her past and escape all that she, like, all of the abuse she was dealing with. And she realized, I have to leave and I have to go. And I don't care where I go. All I know is that wherever I go out, I'm going to be okay. And she came to the land of the freedom, where she's free. And yeah, and about the submissiveness part, like there is toxic submissiveness and masculinity. And I just want to say that the man has to also be worthy of being submitted to.
yeah.
Like if he's not bringing security to the household or providing that safe environment, then how does he expect the woman to submit to him? And it doesn't mean that he has like the upper hand or he has more power. It's like both of them work together. You know what I mean? It's not that one is more powerful than the other. Like I said, there needs to be mutual respect between the two and mutual effort.
So as we prepare to close, I have like a couple more questions for you. The first one being, what do you think creates a cycle breaker?
Wow. That's a great question. I would say communication. Yeah, because if you don't communicate how you're feeling and you hold in all of the things that are hurting you, then how are you gonna like heal from it? Like you have to obviously like find a way to communicate those feelings to, if it's through like a therapist or it's to a trusted friend, and to the person that you have these emotions towards. Like it's really important to communicate that and have that.
That's a really great point, because we talked a lot about like being silent and how silence kind of killed a lot of opportunity. It killed a lot of an ability to heal when we were much younger, when our parents were much younger. So yeah, that open ability to communicate on what you feel, why you feel it, and what do you think could be done to resolve that before it gets too late. And I think a lot of what past generations in like our lives have done is stay silent on a lot of issues that were affecting them. And what does that do? It goes on to the next generation, physical, mental, emotional, because their reactions, like how they wish they could react, is how their offspring is going to end up reacting. And it's going to in a way be worse, because none of it was handled, none of it was dealt with. And like trauma does change DNA, so that sticks with you for generations upon generations. And so that's why it's so important, like address the issue and make an effort to heal.
Yeah, that's so important.
Another thing I would say is like the development of wisdom. I think understanding and becoming more educated on mental health based things, how to handle certain situations that our parents or grandparents didn't really invest in teaching themselves how to do, I think is a very vital component. How do you think people can go about gaining such wisdom on how to deal with conflict and stuff?
I feel like there's many ways they could gain wisdom. A few being that like they could read books to like educate them on certain topics and like conflict resolution and stuff like that. But I know not many people would read books. I would say like based off of like personal experience and what my mom's experience, it was like seeking community, like other moms, like being friends with other moms and helping each other get through what they were going through, and going to like groups where like therapy groups where there's a professional like counselor there that can help guide them and like advise them on what they should do based on their circumstances. To me, most importantly, it was like my mom seeking wisdom and me seeking wisdom and faith. That's what gave her a new identity and a new creation. Like, she didn't have to be the things that she was told she was.
Yeah.
She listened to what God says she is.
Yeah, a lot about the concept of learning has definitely changed in things I want to do when I have kids. I know, like, learning a lot about development, learning a lot about what children actually take in, and being able to recognize, like, what my experiences were and how did I absorb things, how quickly did I absorb things as a young kid, and how fragile and vulnerable, like, young minds can be. How much I wish and want my kids to never have to go through what I went through. And I think that's kind of what motivates me to keep doing this path of healing, because despite all the trauma that I have generationally and like with my own self, I don't want to pass that on. Of course, like, some of it is obviously like inevitable, but there are steps that we can take now pre having kids that can definitely help shape their future. And I think, like, like therapy, seeking community, finding groups, and just becoming more informed on like the mind and on nurturing ourselves and healing ourselves from wounds is definitely important. So we just want to wrap it up by stating again the 3 takeaway points. With every episode, I want to state like 3 things you can take away from what we discussed today, and then I'll let you do the outro or whatever you want to say at the end. Any final points? But the first takeaway point was recognizing and becoming aware of behaviors that our parents had and how they presented those behaviors when we were growing up, when we were kids. I think it's important to be aware of that and understand, like, does that stem from a trauma? Does that stem from how they were raised and how they were brought up? Is that something ingrained in them that caused them to act that way? Like, was it so ingrained in them that they behaved in that way towards us, whether it was like bad or good? Like, I think it's important to identify those, especially when it comes with things that you see that affect the family dynamic. Just a lot that comes with that. It's a very heavy thing. But I think, like, recognizing certain behavioral patterns can help you change them in the long run and help you improve the family relationship for sure. Secondly, listening and understanding your kids. I think respect is a big thing that comes with improving families, and it comes with healing that generational trauma. Learning to listen to each other's feelings and find ways on how to cope, whether that be with therapy or with understanding what physical symptoms are you showing, and really diving deep into, like, why do you feel this way? What led to this? When do you think this started? And really, like, paying attention to the physical health. This healing is important, and I know a lot of it does stem from, like, staying silent and, like, keeping it all in. But a lot of it is, like, it is very important to kind of speak out on those issues.
It's important to address the roots of those issues.
And then a final thing was emphasizing forgiveness. I know we talked a lot about, like, our spiritual walk and stuff, and the big main component is, like, forgiveness. That, if anything, does improve the family dynamic. That doesn't mean you have to forget about what happened. Like, of course, like, it is valid to understand and remember and to work on making sure stuff like that, the trauma, doesn't reoccur. But forgiveness honestly has been the only thing that has saved me from keeping that resentment and keeping that grudge from the generational trauma that has been bestowed on me.
I would say, similar to you, I want to recognize those unhealthy patterns in my family, and I want to choose not to repeat them. I would hate it for my children to go through what I went through or what my mom went through. And I'm just glad that we're in this place where we're trying our best and we're learning how to break those cycles and acknowledging those patterns in our life, and which I think it's like the most important step is recognizing it. We're now going to take action in breaking those cycles. Because if we don't do it, then who else will do it?
Well, thank you so much for your wise words, Julissa. I have loved having you on this episode of my podcast.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It was really interesting.
All right. So future episodes to come with a different variety of topics, guys. I wanted to include a little bit of everything. Of course, there is a lot of mental health topics in here because I just love talking about it and I think it's so important. So thank you for being on one of these important topics that I love to advocate about. If you guys have any questions, feel free to slide into my DMs with any or leave any comments. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and share the Revisiting Arrow with all your friends. And I think that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you stay safe and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.